Zoom. We're recording, so okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Matsell, and I'm coming to you from Seattle, Washington, and I am actually coming to you with the New Now. This is a program that I started a couple weeks ago just to talk to some people around the country that are doing different things, just to understand how people are dealing with this pandemic and the new now. So today I have a great opportunity to introduce Harry Duran. He's living in Minneapolis, Minnesota right now, and he is a podcast strategist. Earlier, the last couple of weeks, we've been able to have a college basketball player. We've been able to have someone in healthcare, someone that lived in New York. And now I thought, since we're a couple weeks into this process, I thought it'd be great to talk to somebody who might be able to, if not leverage this time, share with everyone what's going on. And maybe, I know a lot of people are thinking, hey, what can I do? Maybe I'll try a podcast, or maybe I'll try a different hustle. And Harry is a great person to reach out to and has the expertise. So with that said, I'd like to introduce Harry Duran.
Hey, Tom, thanks so much for having me on the New Now. I'm excited.
Yeah, this is good. This is fun. Harry, I think it's funny because you and I were introduced probably 3 months ago, give or take. And it's just funny how things kind of work out, where I've had the opportunity to talk to you. We kind of talked about what could happen and we put it on the back burner. And then this came about and it's kind of like, okay, let's get started again. So yeah, it's interesting.
So what's been your experience so far? I know we had a couple of different ideas with ways that we could work together, and obviously necessity is the mother of invention. I'm wondering, to just turn the tables on you a little bit, how you thought about, or why you felt like, a lot of times people worry about getting out the right message in the right format, looking perfectly, but we all know that perfect is the enemy of done. And, you've decided to forge ahead with this, and I'm wondering if you could speak about why that's been important, that to get the message out and then clean it up as you go.
Yeah. Honestly, with what I do professionally, being a one-on-one executive coach and being a business strategist, but also working with individuals, I kind of, when this happened, I got hit pretty hard and I fell to one knee. But I really said to myself, you know what, I'm not going to let this stop me. And so for our jobs, I have some other restaurants, or I have 2 restaurants. We were able to pivot with that real quick. But I said, for my job, what can I do? And I wanted to get something out. And to go back to your earlier sentence, my saying that I always say is, done is better than perfect. And believe me, I know I'm anything but perfect right now, but I wanted people to understand that, you know what, if you have an idea, run with it. It doesn't need to be perfect. Get it out there. And one of the messages I wanted to get across to everyone was, let's all help and give 10% of our time, effort, or energy to our neighbors, our community, and everyone around us. And hopefully we'll be able to get through this together. And so one of the thoughts I was thinking is, how can I do coaching online? How can I speak with other people? And I just thought, instead of me doing all the speaking, why don't I get great people like yourself who have great expertise and be able to share with other people? So I thought, having people on from different walks of life, different ages, if they couldn't see themselves in me, they could see themselves hopefully in one of our guests.
What's been the experience so far with the conversations that you've had?
You know what? It's fantastic. I don't know if you've done this, but with my family around the globe and my friends around the country, we've been able to do some happy hour Zoom calls. And by doing this, it helps me stay connected too. So I don't see as many people face to face, as most everyone doesn't, but it's really given me the opportunity to reach out and to understand what's going on and to learn a lot. I love to learn about what people do and how they do things different. I'm not a smart person, but I know when I hear something that's smart, I kind of put it into my tool belt and I'm like, okay, I'll use that later on. And doing stuff like this gives me a great opportunity to do this. So what I'd like to know, go ahead.
No, I mean, I've been a proponent of like the face-to-face conversations as well. So, and I can definitely vouch for the power of having those conversations with people and sharing those stories with the audience.
Yeah, I think honestly, at least from Seattle, I don't know how it's in Minneapolis, but I think a lot of things are going to come out of this where companies and leadership's going to understand that we don't need to have everyone in the office. So I don't know what this is going to do for commercial space, and I really don't know what this is going to do for malls because I know some people at Nordstrom's up here in Seattle said they're doing just as much in sales, but obviously don't have the brick and mortar.
Hmm.
In Bellevue, we have a large location here, 2 stories, and I don't know what they're paying, but I'm guessing they pay $70,000, $100,000 a month. So you get rid of stuff like that, it's gonna definitely have a little different look around town because there are restaurants, there are all smaller businesses that are gonna be closed. But I also think malls, might go by the wayside.
Yeah, I don't think anyone can predict what it's going to look like. But I think to your point that you made earlier, those of us who are in business and are able to pivot and try new ideas and be open to change and be open to doing things differently than we're used to, I think will be the ones that succeed.
So Harry, I think everyone listening would definitely want to jump into podcast strategists and pick your brain and saying, hey, can you give us some of this great information? But I'd like to go back and downshift real quick and tell us a little bit about how you grew up, what you've been doing to kind of get there, because I think a lot of people think, oh, I'll be a podcast strategist or I'll be great at podcasts and just thinking this is it. But there's a lot of steps to get to where you want to get to. And I just want people to understand it doesn't matter what job it is. It could be athletics, it could be acting, it could be being a philanthropist. You don't get there on your first shot, and usually takes a couple of different levels to get there. So I think I would love to hear, and the audience would love to hear how you got there and maybe just how you grew up and what you're doing now.
Yeah, I think about it. If I put in the go in the time machine and go back, I think one of the things I talk about was early on is this idea of like listening to people's voices, right? Just other people's voices. So the earliest recollection is my father, because he would play these, if you remember, like Dale Carnegie, Think and Grow Rich. A couple of these things he had not only on cassette, but he had them on vinyl as well. And he would gather the kids downstairs. And at the time, I wish I'd understand like the importance of something like that for my future development. But I don't think I was paying as much attention as I used to, because his dream was for me to like go to Harvard and go to college. And
Oh, wow.
I actually never graduated from college, and I just jumped into the workforce right away. And then the other influential voice was my boss at the time. Because when you start wearing a suit and you go into work every day in a suit, you basically made it, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what you think, at least when you're that age. I think I was 23 at the time, and I was like going to work in a suit every day at a bank. And then when you hit that 6-figure in salary mark, my boss he made it a point to say, hey, your income is at like the top, whatever it was, 10% of like all people in the country. And I'm like, oh, pat myself on the back. But I'd always wanted to try new ideas. I worked at a couple of different departments. I've worked at JP Morgan Chase. I worked at E-Trade. And then there was an opportunity to go during the dot-com craze. Again, everyone's going crazy, wants to be a part of it. Actually left my paying job
Okay.
to go work at a dot-com startup. And I did it for an unpaid salary. And I actually cashed up my 401k to zero at the time.
Yeah.
Needless to say, that did not pan out the way I thought it would be. But it was just me kind of listening to my friend, the friend that I met, who's still a friend of mine now, trying to jump on that bandwagon. I came back to work in corporate America, and then there was an opportunity to go actually work in Atlanta, and of all things, construction. Like I literally was doing IT consulting, and then this was around 9/11 actually when it happened. I
Okay.
went down to Atlanta, and I worked in construction for 2 years. I hard hat, boots, like climbing a scaffold. I learned how to take off do estimates from blueprints, which
Okay.
I'm assuming might come in handy someday. But needless, like what they say about working with family, like that didn't really pan out. So it was 2004, and I remember getting on a plane flying home to New York with my tail between my legs, basically, because I was forced to go live with my parents at age 34. And I'm sure your listeners can relate, how much time we spend listening to other people's voices while ignoring our own. And so I thankfully had that corporate godfather who I'd worked with 3 or 4 times. And after a couple of months, he got me a job. I ended up working at E-Trade. So I was there for 5 or 6 years. But the entrepreneurial bug like does not go away.
Yeah.
It just keeps sprouting. And I have a passion for electronic music and dance music. I actually grew up DJing vinyl and turntables.
Nice. You're
And
a
those are
nice
still,
collection.
yeah. They're in storage. I'd love to have access to them now, but they're not handy right now. So I see a lot of my DJ friends like doing sets from their bedroom now. So I'm a bit jealous of that. But I created a mobile app. It's called Know Your DJ, and it's basically like a Pandora for electronic music. And I would go to festivals, and I just wanted to have something that I could use myself. And I remember going to a conference in 2014 called New Media Expo to learn how to podcast. And I switched gears because I thought I was going to interview DJs to promote this mobile app. I saw people like Pat Flynn, Amy Porterfield, some of these bigger names in podcasting there. And being a fan of that show Inside the Actor Studio, I don't know if you've ever seen
Yeah, yeah.
that. Yeah, I thought of that, but the podcast version. So I started my show Podcast Junkies, and it's a bit meta. It's a podcast where I interview other podcasters.
Okay. Good.
And so that's been running since 2014, and I do a face-to-face conversation. I was previously using Skype to do the video, similar to the way we're doing it now, but now I use a tool called Squadcast,
Okay.
and I'm actually an advisor to the company now. So it's been interesting because now, I mean, in April it's going to be 6 years, and I've had I'm just releasing episode 218 this week, and it's just been really powerful, this idea of having these face-to-face conversations with people and developing relationships with them. And the video was important because, as you might imagine, having an hour-long conversation face-to-face with someone, really you get to know in a way that's better than if you just were listening on audio.
Okay.
And so a year into that, I started Fullcast, which is my podcast production company. And since then, we've been producing shows for a wide variety of clients. We've worked with K-Swiss. We've worked with Thomson Reuters. We've worked with Olympic gold medalists and people who are, and now developing shows for executive coaches and financial services companies. So it's been great to produce those shows, and now helping business owners find their voice is something we're primarily focused on.
Okay. This is fantastic. I think it's super interesting because there's so many people out there that, especially the younger generation, that get on YouTube, get on Instagram, do everything via social media. But podcasting is something that a lot of people might have heard of. But I think the first one that I really heard of was Tom Green did an interview with Joe Rogan back in like 2007 from his basement, and that was the first time I was like, "What is going on here?" And then over time, people got more professional looking, got the mics, got the lights, got better guests, and now I go on YouTube at night if I just want to decompress. And instead of watching TV, I'll just YouTube Nikki Glazer, Joe Rogan, Tom Segura, Bert, whoever, and they have podcasts for 2 or 3 hours a day where it's just essentially we're sitting around a barbecue having a beer, but we're just doing it from either our homes or studio. So it's definitely a new medium. I guess what I would like to know, and for people listening, is from your experience, how are people using podcasts and how are people leveraging it to monetize it if that's what they want to do with it?
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities if you use it in a way to build your business. Obviously, to your point, there's entertainment podcasts, hobby podcasts, and people have been doing that since podcasts have started. What we primarily focus on is working with business owners who want to build thought leadership in a certain industry, or just using it as a different way to tell the stories of their clients, and have, because they always think about like who's listening to the show. It should be, if you are a business owner, it should be like an ideal prospect. Like there's a framework that we coach clients on for testimonials, for example. Like if you had someone you've worked with in the past, it's a 4-part question saying, "Hey Tom, what were you struggling with before you met in your business? You know, what was your pain point? And you would talk a little bit about that. And the second question is, what was it about our service or offering that attracted you to work with us? And then you would tell us. And then the third part would be, what was the result you had as because of working with us? You know, what's the success you've had? And then the fourth part is, what would you tell someone who was in your shoes 18 months ago, you know, if they were having the same problem? So as you can see, like that framework would be a perfect testimonial. And if you think about that, and if you think about business owners who are listening, if they think about that, you know, using that medium and that format to talk to prospects, or to have prospects listen, you know, you can have some of the clients that you've had success with come on your show. So that's just one example of how you can use a podcast. I
Okay.
always tell clients, make sure you have one clear call to action at the end of each episode. You know, you
Okay.
can send people to socials and where to connect, but ideally you want, remember that podcasts are consumed while people are on the go. And things, it's been interesting to see now that that's changed a little bit because there are no more commutes to work right now, and there's not people going to the gym right now. So people's listening habits are changed. But I think overall, they'll just find a different way and a different place to consume podcasts. So because they're consuming them on mobile, 80% of podcasts are consumed on mobile. People are listening here on earbuds and they're on the go. They're not sitting there with a notebook, you know, copiously taking notes to the whole interview. So you want them to take the next step with you. So one of the things we talk about all the time is this idea of maybe having a lead magnet or a link to their consult page. So hey, I'd love to jump on a chat and let you know how our business can help you with, you know, whatever the topic is. Jump on a free 15-minute chat, and you can make that sort of a triage call where you find out if the person is a fit or not. And very quickly, in 10 to 15 minutes, you know, you don't have to have hour-long conversations with these people because they'd add up over time. But if you made it 10 or 15 minutes, you can quickly figure out, are they a fit or are they not? And then move them into the longer form, you know, strategy call or sales call. Or you can create a lead magnet, and the lead magnet is essentially something that's very easy to consume within 5 to 10 minutes, and it's something that outlines, you know, what you do as your business. So, for example, when we're done wrapping up, and I've got the link here at the bottom of my video. Just if you go to fullcast.co/new now, for example, that's something you could also do at the end of your podcast episode. And also keep in mind that when you're also guesting on another podcast, you have now been given the opportunity to be on someone else's online stage. You know, people think of speakers and physical stages, which we're not going to be seeing a lot of in the short term. So now you have to think, what are my digital stages? You know, where can I go talk if I'm a speaker? And being on other people's podcasts, having a one sheet, which is like a one-page reference for who you are, some sample questions, anything you can do to make the host job easier is valuable. But then when you finish, saying, hey, Tom, thanks for letting me share this story with your audience. I'd love to share some information on how I can help them if that's helpful for them. So just a couple of different things in a couple different ways, which you always want to do, whether it's your podcast, whether you're a guest on a podcast, is always have an opportunity for people to take that next step with you.
Okay. No, I think that's fantastic. I think some people, even like myself, just want to get out there, but aren't thinking how to leverage it. I'm not thinking about how to leverage it for my business, which I should, but realistically, I wanted to get guests on so other people can get value from there. And sometimes just hear something, you know, that they're doing that maybe is going to help their lives. It could be how they're exercising, how they're communicating with their children, how they're doing something now because they've had to try something different. But I do think those tips are huge, and I think they're very important. And I've been taking notes myself because those are things that I want to take advantage of too. So Harry, I know we'll talk about this, and I'm going to ask you this at the end of the podcast. But the fullcast.com new now is what we're on, but the fullcast.com, is that where people can get a hold of you, or what's the best way people can get a hold of you? And we'll talk about this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fullcast.co. Haven't yet registered the .com yet, but that's what was available when I got started. So
Okay.
fullcast.co, and it's short for full service podcast production. And yeah, it's essentially what we do. It's a done for you service. So as we were building up the agency, we were thinking about who we wanted to support, and it was really primarily business owners who came to mind, because if you think about it, this is something that I was coached on early days, is this idea of letting people focus on their genius, right? There's four
Okay.
types of tasks. Those you're bad at, those are good at, those are excellent at, and your genius. Typically those bottom two, right? You have no business doing that. And maybe something like having someone clean your house is something that falls into that category. That third category, those you're excellent at, those are tests that you probably have learned a little bit about, can do reasonably well. For me, it was maybe some web design work. And I remember like struggling with trying to fix something in the sidebar of my website a couple of years ago. And it was taking me the better half of part of a day. I was pulling my hair out, dealing with like HTML. And I ended up calling a developer friend. He literally did it, I think, within like 5 or 10 minutes. And it would just, it really cemented for me this idea of like, oh, that's your genius, like that's what you do like better than anyone else. And that's like, that's, I think, as business owners we forget, like we think we can do that excellent stuff, but it's really not the best use of our time. If you think about opportunity cost, like what's an hour of your time worth, and where should you be spending that time as a business owner? So that's a lot of what drove how we built Fullcast, because we wanted our clients and our business owners to focus on their genius, which is creating compelling content, creating, recording a great solo episode, or conducting a really fantastic interview, and then just saying, okay, audio is ready, and, being the Howard Stern, if you will, just get up, leave the mic, and let the team take care of everything else. So that's where that was born.
No, that's fantastic. I didn't use the word genius. I call it magic. But there's a book I read by Marcus Buckingham, Now Discovering Your Strengths, and he always talks about you're going to be most productive, happiest, and go the furthest in life working out of your strengths, and then your learning opportunities or things that you're not as strong as, if you can get somebody else to kind of help you so those areas don't become a hindrance, you'll save so much time, money, and energy and stress. So just like you're saying, know what you're good at, know what
Yeah.
you're maybe not as good at, or maybe even the things you're not interested in, and let other people do that. And I think what happens is a lot of us, when we're starting out, we're so conscious of money. So we don't want to spend the money. But people don't realize if you spend the money on a couple of little things, you're going to save probably 3 weeks, a month in frustration and start making money, because you're actually going to be at a place to take off instead of just being frustrated and probably give up or stall.
Yeah, it's an important distinction, like that. You have to identify those two things, those things that you're good at, but also the things you're not good at,
Yeah.
which some people forget to do.
Or the things you just don't want to do. Like you said,
Yes,
can you
yes.
clean your house? Yes. But if you can hire somebody to do it every 2 weeks, once a month, a deep cleaning, then you don't feel as bad, and they're maximizing and you're maximizing your time. I've seen people get their dogs walked, get their groceries picked up, laundry, all the little things that you can do. But if you think it takes you 4 hours a week or 10 hours a week, and like you said, what is your time worth? And you can maximize even 50% of the time that you saved, it might be worth it. So I know Tim Ferriss was really big on that. The 40-hour, what was it? The 4 hour
4 hour week
week.
work week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like put out what you can to other people and then do your magic or your genius and maximize it. So fantastic.
Yeah, same exact concept. Definitely agree.
So if people reach out to fullcast.co, what can they expect and what can they do to be prepared to have the best conversation possible with you?
I think really be clear. The first starting point is there's a lot of beginning questions when people get started with the podcast, which is why I created that lead magnet. It's called the Ultimate Podcast Launch Game Plan. And if you go to fullcast.co/new now, you can, it's the 6 pillars that we use when we launch client shows. You want to make sure you're planning and positioning your show from the get-go, thinking about who the intended audience is. A lot of this groundwork can be done before we even have a conversation, or even if we ever have a conversation. But what I'm stressing now is the importance of thinking about a show from an SEO perspective, in the same way you would create a blog post and you would have keywords to help people find the blog post. In that same way, the Apple Podcast ecosystem, which is also Google Podcasts, you'll see shows now that if you put in the name of the show and the word podcast, it'll display on the front page of Google. So be very conscious about how you're naming shows. I use a couple of examples for shows that we've got in motion now. There's a podcast we're creating for Richard Smith, who's an investor. He founded Trade Stops and Trade Smith, and his new show is going to be called Understanding Investing. It couldn't get more basic and more self-explanatory than that. You know exactly what the show is going to cover. We launched a show for my partner, who's a photographer, and she coaches photographers on how to get the photography business started. We called it Photo Business Help. So just the very basics. Think about like when people see the show, they should understand like what is going to be covered. Even the new now, people can relate to that because like, oh, okay, this is not the old now, and this is like currently what's happening, and it's something that I think tells them what they can expect. And then as they continue, there's some of the high level things I talk about. Just have good quality sound. There's a couple of plugins you can use to minimize the overload of the Wi-Fi signal on the during the call. And then a couple of tools like Crisp is a tool that's popular with a KRISP.ai.
Okay.
It's a noise reduction tool if you're in a noisy environment. So make this mic that I'm using, for example, is a Samson Q2U. And that's listed in the game plan. It's $60, and it's a USB connection and an XLR if you want to add a sound card later. But you don't have to break the bank, but you do have to think about how get your show started in the beginning. And then when you think about it from a marketing perspective, um, get the summary, have a website for people to go to, and just the basics of all those things are helpful when you're getting started, and will actually help you make stand out when you're starting a show. A lot of people think you need tens of thousands of downloads. There's a popular hosting company called Libsyn that publishes a report every month, and they say that the median numbers are, if you're getting 140-ish downloads, not 1,000, 140 downloads within the first 30 days your episode goes live, you're doing better than 50% of all shows.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and
Good.
then if you go, yeah, and if you go up to about 1,100, then you're doing better than 80% of all shows. So it's just something that's contextual, so that people realize, look, I don't need the tens of thousands. People think about the high numbers of downloads because sometimes they start thinking about ads and sponsors. And granted, you'll need to hit about 5,000 or 10,000 if you want a sponsor. But that's typically, and that's not the types of shows that we produce. We want just core group of listeners who are really passionate about the subject matter that we're publishing and producing for our clients. And what we're really trying to do there, as you might imagine, like some of our clients, if one of their listeners converts to a client, that's 10,000, 20, $30,000 lifetime value, right? So no amount of sponsorship dollars could even come close to matching that. So it's just being clear, and the more niche and targeted your message is, the better chance you'll have those listeners come back week after week.
Okay, good. I mean, I'm taking a lot of notes here. So be very clear with your title. Obviously, put something up where people understand your website, call to action. And for me, I've circled, get a microphone. So it won't break your bank. So no, these are all great pieces out there. I guess what people might want to know also is, when you talk to different people or hear different people, what are the top 3 things that people might be doing to start in a podcast, or maybe had it for a while, that you're seeing is probably not needed, or probably they're hurting their chances of being successful because they're getting caught up too much in one area when they should be focusing on another?
I think that one of the things that comes to mind is just being consistent. I've heard a lot of my podcasting friends talk about this contract that you have with your listeners, right? They've come to expect your content on a consistent basis, especially if they're listening, especially if those people that are, quote unquote, the super fans that listen on a regular basis. And, every show has them. The people just happen to find your content, happen to resonate with your content. Be consistent with what you're producing on a regular basis. You could have 5 people creating the new now, right? But only one of them is going to be hosted by Tom,
Yeah.
and that's the only one that's going to have your unique combination of work experience, family experience, where you've lived, the life that you've lived, and that whole combination of things make you who you are, and you bring that energy into the show. So don't think that, oh, someone's done this topic already. That's the other thing. Like, oh, someone's covering this and someone's talking about this already. So who am I to have this message or talk about this? When I first started Podcast Junkies, there was a handful of shows that were podcasts about podcasting, believe it or not.
Yeah, no, no,
And
no.
now, we all still going strong. We all have our own audience, and those people are my friends, and I just really come at life from an abundance mindset and realize that there's plenty out there for everyone. This pie is big enough, and there's plenty of people that either now need to hear your message or will need to hear it in the future. The other thing is to remember the evergreen content, like these podcasts that we're creating. They'll be around well after COVID is done with. And so, create content that you're proud of and that you wouldn't mind whether someone heard it tomorrow or, 5 years from now, because ideally, like, the podcast will live on in perpetuity, and there'll probably be other opportunities for um, archiving audio. I know that Google has the Wayback Machine to see old websites that you thought were gone. Somehow they live in some cache file. And I think I firmly believe that the same thing is going to happen with audio. This archival quality, I think, is something a lot of podcasters don't think about. So make sure your content is valuable. From an evergreen perspective. And if your show does grow, I've had, I'm working with some folks who have content that's been around for like 4 or 5 years. If you do get big enough and you do attract sponsors, you can then go back and monetize that back platform, because if people are listening to old episodes, that's valuable for a sponsor. So it's not just that current um, network, those current shows that you're producing, but it's also your whole back catalog could eventually, becomes more and more valuable as you continue to produce content.
From your expertise and from what you've seen from different people, is there a secret formula? And I'm guessing everyone's different, but how many times a week you should do a podcast, how long the podcast should be, 20 minutes, an hour? I've seen 3.5 hours. Is there kind of a sweet spot?
Yeah, I mean, one of the rules that I used to use, rule of thumb, was think about what a typical commute looks like. we,
Okay.
we need to seem to put that one on hold for a while. But it's that when you're first getting started, you want to think about what you can handle. There's a lot of moving parts when you're getting started as a podcaster, and you don't want to sort of jump into the deep end automatically and start producing 3-hour podcasts or doing a daily show. And I know a lot of people copied what John Lee Dumas what he did with Entrepreneur on Fire, but that was a different time and a different place. And quite honestly, it would be nearly impossible to replicate that, because he just sort of caught lightning in a bottle there, was, catching that resurgence in podcasting, was able to do a daily show. There was no mid-roll, there was none of these big sponsorship dollars, and a lot of those early sponsors got started, and media agencies got started with him and with his show. And so people see that they think they can replicate that, but you're biting off probably more than you can chew if you're just getting started, because as you might be able to attest to, there's a lot of moving parts. There's microphone, there's where you're going to publish, there's how you record, how you book guests, like there's how you do summary of the episodes, where you share them with social media, all these moving parts, and you want to set yourself up for success. So I like to have new podcasters start with a weekly show and just commit to getting that 30-minute episode out, and as much as possible try to do it in one take, because otherwise then you're adding like editing responsibilities to your plate as well. And quite honestly, a lot of new podcasters don't come into this as editors, so that's one more thing to learn. So set yourself up for success. Focus on one social channel in the beginning and just drive home the message there. If you can, post the episodes and a bit of promo on the others, because there'll always be people that find it. But just have that, grab a hashtag for your show and continuously use that, because when people find it later on and they click the hashtag, then they'll go back and see your old catalog of stuff you've done. So I do that, for example, to promote Fullcast, and I try to post on LinkedIn at least once a day, and I always put at least one of my hashtags, I only do 3, is hashtag Fullcast. So we do it when we promote client shows. We just pick a hashtag for your show on all your social platforms is one way to sort of tie your whole back catalog together. But again, the point is, keep it simple early on, and don't overwhelm yourself with the tech, and set yourself up to succeed. If you can, record episodes in batch, If you knock out 2 to 3, 4 episodes in one day, and you're doing a weekly show, you have your whole month's content
Wow.
ready to go. You know, don't just sit there waiting to produce a new show every week, because you're going to get exhausted. There's actually a term called pod fading. It's about the 7 to 10 episode mark where new podcasters just realize this is too much. I give up. I can't do this anymore. So don't pod fade.
No, these are fantastic tips, and again, I'm writing down my own things because these are great. I think what I've noticed, and again, some people are more technically savvy, and some people are not. I point to myself, but it's one of those things. I said, you know what, just start it, and I think you and I talked about this. When you start something, you really figure out what's working, what's not working, and then you have to work to fix it, compared to hypothetically thinking, what do I need? And you waste a week, a month at a time. So
Yeah,
by jumping in the pool, you really understand, okay, I need to work on my breathing quick. And I think the editing part, keeping it simple, and making it digestible is very important. I think you talked about the niche, having a clear message, a call to action. Those are all fantastic. Having the little technical things like the microphone or the editing possibilities could come later. But again, you're not breaking the bank. So I think that's huge for people to understand. But you know what? I probably committed one of the errors that you were talking about. When I first thought about this, I was like, hey, let's do it every day and get a message out, da, da, da. And then I was thinking, hold on, I have a lot of things to do, as everyone has, outside of this world. And I'm thinking, hold on, after about 2 weeks, it's going to be hard getting people.
exactly.
And it was one of those things that now you can do it because there's a lot of people at home. But in another 2 months, it might change. So I've started with 3 times a week, doing Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. I think I'm actually going to pull back to 2 days a week, Tuesday, Saturday, and then Thursday I'm going to be doing like maybe coaching office hours. So if people just want to ask me questions, instead of charging them one-on-one coaching or group coaching, they can still get an opportunity, because I think there are a lot of people who've lost their job or incomes, and they're in a tough spot. And this is one way that I can give some of my time away and possibly help somebody, or at least introduce them to somebody, or give them something to look at that's going to help them, so they don't just have their head in the sand.
Yeah, and the other thing you could do, and something we can continue to talk about for your show, is you could have these go live every twice a week, if you will, and then start to bank those. And then as we think about the actual podcast itself, also maybe think about maybe releasing that on a weekly cadence, so you have those in the can. And you don't necessarily have to match the live cadence,
Yeah,
because you're recording them, and then we can kind of clean them up and get them published as the podcast episodes. But again, the beauty of that is, for people who didn't listen live, for people who weren't on Facebook, it's going to just introduce you to a whole new audience. So I think that's something I want to make sure we work on to get this into the podcast format as well.
good. And I think one of the things that I can talk about, at least for my generation, Generation X, Generation Y, someone who's above 40 years old, don't worry about what you look like. Don't worry about what you sound like. And don't worry about flubbing up or saying or yum, whatever. People, this is what's going to happen. And one thing I've seen by watching a lot of podcasts are, people are more relatable when they do screw up,
Yeah,
or there's something
totally.
that goes on in the background. Don't worry. If you want to take a drink of water, go ahead. If
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
so it's those little things of not being perfect. That's where I think sometimes having something done compared to something perfect is a lot different. And then I'm probably 6 or 7 podcasts in, and now I'm really starting to funnel in and say, okay, the microphone is going to be a huge piece for me. Editing some pieces, having my call to action. And you learn by talking with other people, seeing other podcasts, and obviously talking to experts like yourself. So that's one of the reasons why, for myself, I'm thinking, heck, what can you leverage? I probably can't talk to you because of your schedule or anything else if I'm just calling you whenever I need to. But I know you have the time, and by doing this, we're both getting something out of this by talking and communicating. And I think a lot of people can do the same thing. I don't know what everyone's niche is, but it could be a child who's 15 years old. I see those guys killing it on YouTube and having 15 million followers. I'm like, what am I doing? I have like 5. But it's just, I think don't compare yourself to other people. That's number one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just do it for yourself. Don't do it for other people. Do it for yourself. And I think it's like people always say, do what you love, money will follow. And
Yeah.
if you do what you want to do and don't listen to the outside noise, I think you'll get to where you want to get to in time, with practice, with effort and energy.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned, this idea of the drinking the water, it's something you learn from a podcasting perspective, is that when you speak for an extended period of time, your mouth gets dry. And what I've noticed, I mean, this is what you see when you produce, the hundreds of shows, is there's an actual wave file that's like a little sharp spike, and it's when people smack their lips, they go, and it's what happens is they're doing it because their mouth is dry. So like we're always reminding clients is like, make sure you have your water handy, and a lot of times they're not video, so it's not a big deal, but it's just continue to drink water so you stay refreshed. And I'm making more of a conscious effort to just actually drink 4 of those hydro flasks
Yeah.
a day, try to get that gallon of water in.
Well, I've
I think it's
learned
helpful.
things, everything I do, like drinking water more often now is one of those things. But my sister got me into putting lemons in my water because
Oh, okay. Yeah.
the citrus, but I think it's antioxidants or something. So, and having a little lemon in the water kind of helps you salivate too. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
these little things that, I, again, not a smart man by any chance, but what I do is I'm very smart at picking the things out and then making them my own. So
Yeah.
I probably have 50 things that I can quote or do and practice morning routines, but it's from other people that I've really admired or saw that there was a benefit for them doing it. And I thought, heck, there'd be a benefit if I did it. So don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if people are going to get a hold of you, what is the best way they can get a hold of you? And again, who are the best people that you could probably make a difference for? I know you took someone like myself who knew nothing about
Mhm.
the podcast world and was able to break it down. But who are the people that you can help out the quickest, the fastest, to make the biggest difference on? And then obviously anyone can call, but who's more your niche or target?
Would you mind if I shared a quick story
Yeah,
to that
please go
point?
ahead.
So when I came back from Atlanta, and I told you I had to go back, move in with my parents at 34, I did actually have a plane ticket to Thailand to go visit a friend.
Okay.
And so I decided to do that. I didn't have a job at the time. I thought, what the heck? And I landed, and he took me on this like amazing tour. And we, the first day or second day, we went on a hike, and he took me up to this top of this amazing waterfall overlooking a valley. And I remember him saying, "Oh, step over here. Like the view is amazing. You got to see this." And I stepped into it, and I stepped into the stream. And in the stream, I slipped, and I basically went up like in the air, landed on my back, and started to get carried over the edge of the waterfall. This literally was happening within like seconds. It's happened so fast. I almost didn't have time to think. Thankfully, out of the corner of my eye, I saw like a boulder like on the bank. I stuck my left foot out, and that basically stopped me. And I was like shaking. My friend, like wide, his eyes wide as saucers, he kind of picked me up. We were able to kind of, you know, get regain our composure. Ended up having a fantastic trip. And you don't think about these things like in the moment, but I remember when I got back to New York, I was like, wow, that would have been like a shame if I had died with my voice still inside of me.
Oh yeah.
So now I think about that, and I'm reminded of that, and this is sort of what drives me. And I have this mission of helping a million people find their voice, because I want everyone to realize that whoever's listening, whether now live or after the fact, or in 5 years from now, that every single person has a story to tell. And that's why I think something that I believe, and something that we help people do. And so to your point, and you were asking me like who we can help. Obviously we focus on business owners, but it can be an individual who wants to tell the story, or it can be a business who wants us to tell the story of their business. This, a lot of people don't think of businesses as living, breathing entities, but we're reminded of that now more than ever, that without the people that help us do the day-to-day things, there is no company. there was one of the companies posted something on LinkedIn about all their employees working from home, and they did like a montage of like people waving at the camera and just kind of from their kid's bedroom or just in the basement or with a blanket. It was like 20 or 30 people, but I was like, wow, this is the human face of that company, you know? And so just kind of thinking about that, whether you want to tell the story of your clients or tell the story of your employees, we love being able to help companies share those stories, and those, those types of projects light me up because it humanizes the company and it puts them in a new light. And I think when people see that and they hear that, it affects them in a different way.
Yeah, it was funny. I was at probably over the weekend. I was on YouTube, and they have an SNL Saturday Night Live version, and Tom Hanks did it from his house. But they
Yeah.
showed everyone introducing themselves like primetime players, but everyone's from home, and it's weird, but it's not weird. I think everyone accepts it because you've seen podcasts and everyone's understanding. So I think one of the biggest things for myself when I started was I don't like my voice. I need to be perfect. This looks stupid. I don't know what I'm doing. And then the other thought was, who's going to want to hear this? Now,
Yeah.
you know what? There might be one, there might be three, there might be five, but if you make a difference for that one person, it means a lot. So for myself to give 45 minutes, an hour of my time and ask someone like yourself to come on who actually has an expertise that somebody in the audience might want to listen to, I think that's huge. And I think, we can all do something. Some people want to monetize it, and I think that's great. And I would like to do it sometime, or just donate your time and get out there. It doesn't matter, but don't worry about looking foolish and don't worry about what people say. I think it's making yourself vulnerable to the opportunity is going to be the biggest difference.
Totally agree. Definitely well
So,
put.
good. Well, I'm realizing that we are coming up to about 40 plus minutes above that. So I don't want to be taking too much of your time. But I want to thank you so much because I think there are a lot of people either have thought about it or started podcasting, especially during these couple of weeks. So I think you were the perfect guest to have on. But I want to leverage your expertise and really let people know how to get a hold of you. So again, can you let people know how to get a hold of you? How maybe not talk about the charges, you could talk to them later, but if you work hourly, monthly on retainer, just so people have some basics. So when they talk to you, they're a little prepared.
Yeah. So again, fullcast.co/new now. It's the quickest way for you to just grab that one pager, the ultimate podcast launch game plan. So for anyone who has any questions about getting started, answers a lot of the beginner first early questions that I stumbled with even early on. And then there's also an ability to set up just a quick chat with me. You can go to fullcast.co/chat 15. And it's a free 15-minute consult just to see if we're a fit. And we work on typically it's a monthly retainer. So we just engage for clients. We try to do 6-month minimums when we're working 6 to 12-month minimums when we're working on client shows, just to kind of build up that getting the show launched and then working on the visibility and the production of the show, and just, testing out different ways for how to make the show more engaging and just building that long-term listenership, which is really valuable for new podcasts.
Okay, great. And since I have you on, I want everyone to see your genius. And so I'm going to put you on the spot. What are 3 things that I can do to make this show better?
Well, we talked about the first one is I think the microphone
Okay.
would help, and maybe looking at a couple of ways to help optimize the signal. There's a tool called Trip Mode. It's tripmode.ch. It's a weird URL, I know, but it's something that I've been using constantly. It's an interesting tool. It actually toggles anything that's using the internet. So for example, I have it turned on now, and I have Chrome, and I have Zoom as the only apps that can actually ping the internet. And why that's important right now, as you might imagine, everyone across the globe is doing video calls right now.
Okay.
So anything you can do to improve the signal um, of your call is going to help
And that's
dramatically.
trickmode.ch.
Trip Mode, yeah, Trip, TRIP.
Oh, true.
MODE. It was created for business travelers who were using a lot of those Wi-Fi hotspots with limited time on them. So they
Sure.
were trying to make sure that they only turned it on when they had to, and they were only using apps. Because as you might imagine, Dropbox, Google Drive, Evernote, all these apps, they're using the internet constantly, and it's the last thing you want when you're on a call like this. So optimize it, optimize your signal. And if you're in a noisy environment, Crisp with a K, KRISP .ai. It's a really cheap tool. I think it's $10 a month. And if you happen to be in a noisy environment, it removes a lot of the ambient noise. One last one, if you are going to turn this into audio, Auphonic, AUPHONIC.com. And I've listed that in the one in the game plan, but that helps you do very simple mastering if you're not an audio engineer and you want to take your audio and just clean up the basics and level it and remove a little bit of the noise, the background noise. It's a great tool. You get 2 hours free a month
Oh,
with that
wow.
service. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I got out of this hopefully as much as everyone else did, but I think this is a great time. And I think you're a great person because I know I've been able to leverage some of your time. So I will give you a personal testimonial that this is a person that obviously knows what he's doing, but will save you time, money, and energy. All this stuff that I think you're talking about, even myself, we can learn on the internet. But how many books, how many seminars, how many things have we learned that we can speed up the process for other people? So anyone who's interested in podcasting, different strategies, or learning the basics, or learning how to fine tune a couple things, I think Harry is your man. So I thank you so much for your time.
I thank you for having me on and let me share my story with your audience, Tom. I really appreciate it and looking forward to working together.
Great. Have a great day, Harry. Thanks, everyone, for the new now. Have a great rest of the week, and I will be coming to you later on. I think we're going to start on Tuesday, Saturday. So I'm just listening to what you said. Reduce your time. So be well, my friend.
Take care.